Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are not yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button and get yourself subscribed. Also hit the notification bell because a lot of videos are coming up like these to make your journey smooth. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for being there for our content. And equally, there is the link to my channel description, my Slack channel description, where I share a lot of resources to help your DevOps and cloud computing journey. So you want to click on that link and join our community right away. Now, the next important question which you want to answer as far as Kubernetes is concerned is the management of secrets. How do you manage secrets in your Kubernetes deployment? And as far as secrets management is concerned, you have the Kubernetes secrets deployment, right? You can configure your Kubernetes secrets file where all your secrets are stored. And now, after storing all those secrets in your Kubernetes secrets file, you then configure role-based access control for access into your secrets file, right? Equally, if you are running your Kubernetes in a build environment like Jenkins, you can store your Kubernetes secrets in your Jenkins credentials. And then after storing those variables or those environment variables in your Jenkins credentials, you now access the variables in your Jenkins script or your Jenkins pipelines as environment variables. So there's no need to expose your API keys or to expose your username or to expose passwords for your Kubernetes deployment. If you're running them in a Jenkins pipeline, you want to store them in Jenkins credentials where they'll be accessed as environment variables, or you can create a Kubernetes secrets file where those various files or where the various secrets will be accessed with role-based access control configurations for your Kubernetes deployment. So those are some of the ways which you can use to effectively put in a structure that will manage secrets in your Kubernetes deployment or in your Kubernetes cluster, be it standalone or in a continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. Now, the next question which can probably be asked is how you will expose your application in your Kubernetes cluster to your users or to your end users, right? How you expose your application in your Kubernetes cluster to your users. And as far as the Kubernetes setup is concerned, by default you should know the entire Kubernetes setup, where we have our master node, and our worker nodes, and then we also have our API server, our HCDL, and all the components of the master node, and then we also have our kube proxy and our core DNS and all the other components of the worker node. Now, you can expose the application in your Kubernetes deployment using the Kubernetes service, right? So the service gives you the ability, or your Kubernetes service will give you the ability to access the application that is hosted in your Kubernetes pods. Now, once you set up Kubernetes service, the service can then be integrated with the Kubernetes or with application load balancer that would then expose your application maybe through Route 53 to the end users. So you're talking about Kubernetes service for exposing your application. And equally, if you're or sometimes as far as exposing your application is concerned, follow-up questions can come like, how will you manage traffic into your Kubernetes cluster? And some recruiters will ask your experience with ingress controllers or your experience with ingress as far as Kubernetes is concerned. So managing ingress or exposing your application through your service, your Kubernetes service, you should make mention of the usage of Nginx ingress controller. That is one of the widely used ingress management system for Kubernetes deployment, the Nginx ingress controller. So you also want to make reference to your Nginx ingress controller for access or for management of traffic in your Kubernetes deployment, right? So make sure you know how to make use of Kubernetes service and how you've configured or how to configure ingress controller in Kubernetes deployment. And the Nginx ingress controller, which is mostly used for ingress control, ingress management for Kubernetes deployments. The last question which I'll be answering in this series is how you use Kubernetes to deploy a microservice application to the world, or how you use Kubernetes to deploy a microservice application and possibly some best practices in performing such deployment. The very first thing which will come to your mind in essence is you're actually decoupling a monolithic application into a microservice application. And the very best practice which you will do is to produce or is to come up with smaller versions of the application or smaller sections. Take for example, you have an application that has maybe a home page, an about us, a card, a blog, or whatever pages there is in the application. The very first step, like I mentioned, is you bringing out those major components in your application as smaller services. Now, once you've been able to identify those major components as smaller services, you first go on to produce container images of those services. And those container images, by default, you produce them maybe using a service like Docker, which is a containerization technology that is mostly used in the industry. So once you use Docker to produce those smaller container images, you will then use the images to create your Kubernetes pods. Remember, the Kubernetes pod is the basic functional using in your Kubernetes cluster, and it is what contains your container image. Now, once you've been able to create container images of each of the various microservices, you'll then use Kubernetes deployment to effectively manage the creation and deletion of those various pods. And once you've configured your Kubernetes deployment, the next most important thing which you're looking at is setting up your Kubernetes service to expose the application that is sitting in your Kubernetes pods through the containers to the entire world. And then perhaps you configure other functionalities like role-based access control or volumes and other things or security around your Kubernetes cluster. So first, you decouple it into different smaller services. Second, you containerize the various smaller services. Third, you create Kubernetes pods. Then you manage the creation and deletion of those pods with Kubernetes deployment, and after that, you expose the application through the Kubernetes service. So that will be a small workflow on how you can expose a microservice application, or how you can decouple monolithic application into a microservice application, and then you expose that application to the entire world. I hope these videos have been helpful to give you a very kickstart or to help you prepare for your interview as far as Kubernetes is concerned. Hit the subscribe button if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, please. And if you're a returning subscriber, hit the notification bell, and equally join my community on Slack and get access to those resources that will help you further. Check out our video on services which you should know when going for an interview, especially AWS services, and our other videos that have to do with common interview questions. See you in the next video.